G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. My name's Nick and this is Nicktrition. In today's video, I talked to my mate Dalton Franke. We're discussing motivation and this video was originally streamed live on YouTube. We go over Dalton's current practices and how he uses motivation to get the best from his clients. Fair warning, this is a pretty long one and we go balls deep into some of the science. But if you can make it to the end, I promise you'll have some great takeaways you can use to assess and inspire motivation in yourself and others. On with the video. We should, I know last week we tried this and we kind of just chatted the whole time. So let's crack on because that one person watching might be actually interested in motivation and what we're here to talk about today. I did some of the pre-reading that you sent over. I'll be honest, you're the expert here. I'm very much being led by you as far as all the actual information goes. I'm just here for my good looks.
Oh yeah. Essentially, like you have to. I definitely don't lack in that department, mate. So you've got the beard, luscious beard that I wish I could grow.
Well, unfortunately, I've got this awesome setup behind me, but
unfortunately,
I can't see, like none of the lights or anything actually shine on me if I stand there.
Oh yeah,
when I've got the computer and everything, so I'm just over here. There's
literally we just got a whole bunch
of
of lights to set up so that I get a natural light because here it's a bit artificial at the moment and stuff. So hopefully by the next one it will look a lot different. It'll be really cool in here, and I'll be as like casual as you are over there.
Alrighty, man. So we wanted to talk about motivation today, and we're talking like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. That's going to be so hard for me.
So I figured like most people don't realize that people just have this assumption that we need to get a little bit more motivation, or if I could just get some motivation, things would be really good. And when I started thinking about those sentences, because I'd hear clients say it all the time, or I'd repeat it thinking that I was, saying the same message that I was thinking. It never really, like when you unpack it, you're like, what the hell, like, what am I actually getting at here? And what am I meaning? And so because of that, I started diving into the whole aspect and breadth of motivation and really trying to understand that. So this all kind of happened as a consequence of having to leave the previous company that I was working with. And looking back at that, I was like, what made me good working with these guys, and what made some of the people that I helped achieve some of their really cool goals? And I basically came to the conclusion that I didn't really help many people get better. I helped people who are already good, like tweak themselves and achieve some better results. But I didn't take a lot of people from being like horrible at their nutrition approaches, their training approaches, and kind of give them this massive transformation and get them to come out the other side. What I kind of looked at was more that those people would struggle somewhere between, would struggle a bit, and somewhere between week 4, 6, 8-ish would kind of start dropping off, start less communication going on, less, activity and stuff in their check-ins, and their results would like falter and kind of stall. And we were a little bit limited in at least the coaching approach that we kind of did there, but I wanted to know why I couldn't help those people and what was wrong. And it was like, how was I not motivating them enough? Was I not giving them enough meal plans for them to be able to follow? Was I not did I not hit the magic macros and stuff like that would have worked for them, had I have done it properly? Maybe I'll shoot at program design. So I kind of thought about all of those different aspects, and in doing that, I was like, what? Like if I'm going to achieve like real behavioral change here, I need to become way more well-read and understand the whole topic of motivation, let alone behavioral change, and really trying to affect that into people as opposed to just going, hey, here's some macros, or here's some meal plan and stuff like that to kind of help them along their way. And it's not to fire shots at anyone that does that as a coach. I think that's totally fine, and I did it for ages. I think there's just a way that we could go about doing it a little bit better. And what I found along that journey was that people do a lot of outsourcing of their motivation. When they hire a coach, they outsource that motivation and say, all right, I'm paying you for these results, but I also expect you to like motivate me and keep me going and stuff like that. And because of that, I was like, well, if people are going to constantly do this to me, and this is going to be something that we're going to have to work through and teach and learn, like, why are they doing that to me? To what benefit? And is there an actual benefit for them doing it? And so I, through this and also through my own university study, so I studied a Bachelor of Exercise and Nutritional Science and have done the psych components for at least the last 2 years now. And that's heavily based around sports psychology, behavioral change, and weight loss and stuff. And because of that, I like what we walk through self-determination theory. And it's basically a bunch of theories that have all been combined together that kind of describe this overall approach to getting people to become more autonomous in their life and achieve the things that they want to be achieving. And it breaks down different domains and stuff. And we won't talk about all the different domains, but we'll kind of touch on some different topics from them. And so a part of the motivation, that extrinsic stuff, is that people externally regulate that motivation to someone. They pay a coach. They're saying, hey, I expect these results and stuff like that out of this. You're going to teach me some stuff, cool, whatever their relationship is. But they're like, there's this like outsourcing of that motivation that goes on. And what we found in the research is that that outsourcing of the motivation is probably the weakest form of motivation that you could have. It's fine. It totally sustains you. It gets you by. And while someone's there and checking on you and walking through and keeping you accountable, it does wonders for you, but it has no long-term lasting benefits. As soon as that person's gone, it drops off. And so you have to find another external regulator to go, who am I going to hold myself accountable to? What do I do? And a lot of people find success in social media. They put stuff up online, keep themselves accountable to the people who watch their stories or think that people are watching their stories or whatever the case may be. And they do some external regulation to that. And that's another way. It's totally fine to do. Because they've found a way to outsource it. But what that doesn't show is it doesn't lead to this like long-term self-efficacy or autonomy that it should be achieved by someone by changing the type of motivation that they're relying on and slowly turning it into something that becomes a little bit more self-identified along the way. And so through that discovery, I was like, how do I take people from like outsourcing this motivation through that journey? And what does that kind of look like? And I've tried to develop and build a whole bunch of things that work on that as well. And so out of those 4 types of motivation, there's for extrinsic motivation, there's 4 subcategories for some clarification for anyone that's listening or watching this. That's the external regulation. So it's really, really kind of weak. There's introjected regulation, which is the idea that if you're paying someone to do something or someone's given you a task, there's some emotional burden that's associated with that. So it could be I'm paying a coach or something like that, and therefore they've given me a meal plan. And if I don't follow that, I'd feel like shit. So I follow the meal plan because I don't want to feel like crap. I know they've invested time in it. And when they ask me about it next week, when we don't get the results, I don't want to feel like crap. And so those 2 are kind of like weak. They don't really lead to long-term sustainable changes and stuff. And then we've got the identified regulation, which is kind of the people who go through and really align with what their behaviors are. They kind of see themselves as someone that actively participates and bees in the sport and stuff like that. So you've got from someone that's just like, oh, I'm doing this and handing over that motivation to someone else, to this other one where if you identify and align with it, like how do you outwork someone, or like how do you outperform against someone who thinks about the sport as much as being a part of who they are, than someone who's just going like, oh, this is someone else's issue. I'll hand it off to them, get some information back, and whilst they're there, they can like pull me along and stuff like that. And so in looking at that, I was like, how do I get people along that journey to become a lot more self-identified? How do they align with it? What can we do to help them work through that? And so in doing that, I wanted to look at the whole process of just getting them on board. And it was like, what's the process of getting someone on board? What do? We talk about their goals, their fears, and their like desires and stuff like that. And it was like, well, how do we talk about goals and fears and desires and stuff? Like generally when people say something to me about whatever their goal is, they're like, I'd like to lose a couple of kilos. Like I'd like to have a little bit more energy. A lot of that is, it's so great, but it's very superficial and it's probably not the total truth. There's way more like deeper layers that go to it. And maybe someone's not comfortable exploring those with you straight away, but they're definitely able to think about themselves like in the moment or away from it and come back to you and then let you know some, identification that they've had a thought and work through it. And instead of it being that superficial stuff, which doesn't withhold you against temptation or keep you like going when hunger is like knocking at the door. Like how do we get into a deeper level of understanding what their goals and desires are to help them identify with the things that we're actually trying to work on. Because if we're trying to get to that self-identified regulation, it has to be something that they really, really want. And it has to align with these concepts of not just goals, but their values, like who they are as people. And so it was through these reading of that, and then through kind of having that revelation, that I was like, what the hell? Like, what are values then? Because I know what goals are. People talk about that all the time. People talk about like characteristics and stuff. So what the hell is a value? And that kind of led me down the path to figuring out and working through some acceptance and commitment therapy, which walk through a lot of identifying some value-based delivery therapy methods and counseling methods and stuff like that. And it's kind of a very Eastern understanding of ourselves and stuff. It's not really something we talk about in at least Western culture. And our values are like, they're a way of describing ourselves that make us like light up inside, that make us feel really warm and fuzzy. So if someone were to describe you as courageous, you know, to me, it sounds nice, but it does make me like warm and fuzzy. If someone said like you were self-compassionate or compassionate, I'm like, yeah, that hits me here. So like, I love that. If someone said I was compassionate, like I work really hard to be compassionate and self-compassionate. So like that makes me go like, whoa, yeah, that's who I am.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole bunch of these different values and stuff that I walk people through. And it's when they can identify self, so like those values, and we can align those values with the goals that they're actually trying to work on. We've got this self-identified regulation going on now. They can see not only the goal that they want to be working towards, they make sure it's aligned to their value, but now they're ticking the right level of motivation that eventually becomes their own fuel to keep themselves going along. Because intrinsic motivation is the stuff that internally drives you, and not everyone has high intrinsic motivation. So we can't always say like, oh, you'll just develop more. It might happen with experience and stuff like that, but it's not something that's guaranteed to happen. So if we can't always rely on that intrinsic motivation, and we can build extrinsic motivation, and we can make it self-identified, and they can continually apply it, then it was like, wow, I've kind of got a path now to helping people walk through at least the 4 or 5, maybe 8 weeks of behavioral change, which is going to be the hardest weeks, where people are addressing a lot of stuff that hold them back. And that provides them a lot more like firepower and stuff to get there. And it was that examination, thinking about it, and then constantly drawing that against the people that were already good, that were working with me before. They'd already done all these things years ago through their own natural selection. So it was like, wow, here's a process of stuff that people may have missed in their own development, and just at different speeds because of different things in their lives and haven't got there. It's like, here's a path that I can actually walk someone through to get them to really align with something, figure out what it is they really want, and move forward from there, that develop their own self-regulated identification, motivation.
So the values that you talk about, is there like a standard list of those values, or is it something that,
but I do. Yeah, I've got one that I could probably send as a link. It's done by Russ Harris, who is a acceptance and commitment therapy practitioner that writes a lot of guides and stuff like that. He's got a value list that came out with, I believe, his book, The Happiness Trap, or maybe The Reality Slap. He's got 2 brilliant books, both addressing it from kind of different points of view. And The Happiness Trap has a lot of application for most people. It's kind of written for the broadest audience possible. And it really makes it easy to kind of live by. But if people just type into Google Russ Harris values list, it'll come up as like a value page that's got like 60 things on it. I think it is 60 different values and stuff like that. And I can also send it to you as a link so that you've got it in, and you can post it somewhere else if you want to keep it. And use it.
I'm just chucking these in the comments now.
Cool.
So it was a happiness trap, and what was the other one?
The Reality Slap is the other one. Brilliant book.
Nice. And so this is kind of the area you went to when you wanted to learn about all this stuff. So it kind of sounds like the big key is moving somebody's extrinsic motivation and finding a way to translate that into their extrinsic into their intrinsic motivation. These words, it's pretty early for me.
Yeah, so within, I should clarify that within extrinsic motivation, we have both internal and external stuff. So
Hmm.
there's stuff that we do extrinsic motivation that falls under that umbrella for self-determination theory that we do externally, and then there's the internal stuff. So that self-identification, that's the real powerful one. If we can get it to there where they're really identifying it and making it align with their own personal goals and stuff like that, then you've got something that's ready to cook that will carry them all the way through.
Great, yeah. So do you think there's a couple of like really key and easy, like low-hanging fruit tips that you can give to someone, not just for coaches who are trying to, use these strategies with their, like I say, strategy. It's not really a strategy, but with their clients, but also for people who are trying to find their own, like guiding someone to find their own values, for example, so that,
Right.
if they were to seek out coaching or any other form of self-improvement, I guess, that would require that sort of motivation that they can then tap
Yeah.
into.
Yeah. I find like having it's, I guess the low hanging fruit would be still outsourcing that motivation, still using something like that, because it's totally fine to get you going. And it's like, I use the analogy, it's like listening to an inspirational Spotify playlist or something like that before going to the gym, or watching Arnie talk on YouTube to like psych yourself up to go lift a big lift or something like that. It's an arousal method that you can use and has the validity. It's just outside of like developing something for yourself that helps you get into the moment and tap into your own resources.
Yeah.
It's something that you require just to be there at that point in time. So you can still use any of those methods to use that type of motivation and get you started off with. So hiring a coach and stuff like that does definitely do that. I think for finding our values, it's really kind of a question of like, if someone were to describe me, if I overheard myself, if I overheard someone else having a conversation and describing me, would I like be proud of the way, the descriptors that they use to describe who I was as a person? What are like, do I align with those values? That's kind of how you want to be thinking about it. So trying to figure out your values is, if you don't have that list, it's more about like, if someone were describing you in a conversation, or if someone were like telling your kids like how you were as a person when you were at your age that you are now, like what type of like values do you have for yourself? And so it's like, it's not something that you can just tick off. You don't just go like, I was courageous today and like I get to tick that off my list. It's who you are as a kind of a person, like it's very fiber of who you are. So it's, if you're thinking about it as just like, oh, it's just another thing that I need to make sure that I'm doing today, it kind of doesn't work right.
Yeah.
And which is why I kind of take issue with fitness is and a value that he has in that. And I think fitness is kind of something that we can't tick off. I think it, but you could like have, I think self-compassion and choosing fitness as your avenue for that would make more sense. So there's some of them in that list that may, I think, like could be technically not a value because you could tick it off. But it depends, I guess, if you really identify with fitness so much so that it is like the very fiber of who you are, then I guess that could apply to you. But for me, fitness is kind of something that it's like, I really do enjoy it. It's across all my aspects of my life. But I wouldn't, if someone described me as like, oh, he's that fit guy, I'd probably be like, oh yeah, I'm probably someone else as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't align for me as much. But if someone were to say like, I'm really compassionate, I love that. Or like a lot of honesty, I love that, because that's why I get triggered and I write posts and like call out different companies and stuff like that when I see like blatant like hypocrisy or people like being dishonest and stuff like that. I can't handle that. It really just grinds with my worldview. So I really if someone were to say honesty, I definitely like that. And so that's a kind of easy way to think about who you are and identify what those are. And then if you're trying to think about the goals, I have a really easy solution for it. Is write down whatever your goal is, and then underneath that, write why 5 times on 5 different lines underneath that, and answer that why. So if it's like, I want to lose 5 kilos, why do you want to lose 5 kilos? Well, I'd like to look better at the beach. Well, why do you want to look better at the beach? Because I think that maybe if I had a better body at the beach, I'd feel more confident in myself. Why do you think that you should feel more confident in yourself? Or why do you want to feel more confident in yourself? Well, I've never got to be able to feel that as a kid growing up, and so like I think that if I had that, I'd be able to be a better person. It would help me have a better relationship, blah blah blah. So you can see how just asking that why respectively a couple of times gets people to can go deeper. And I essentially call it like mining. They're mining that what was a very superficial, goal that a lot of people say offhandedly. It's now turned into like, oh, this is like really unpacking the where it comes from and what they're actually saying when they mean that, because they understand it. They say, I really want to lose 5 kilos, and they know they mean like, I don't have a great sex life, I might not like my body when I'm naked, I might be embarrassed and not go to the beach, I might miss out, I can't run around with my kids. They might know that's exactly what they mean, but we don't. So we hear it and we're like, all right, cool, they just want to lose 3 kilos, what a chill goal, cool, let's take it, chill. And for them, it's like the utmost urgency, because what they've really meant is like, between living the next 5 years with as their best life or not, and still doing yo-yo diets and stuff like that. So I found that is a super easy way to apply it. Answer that question 5 times, and whatever it is that you come out, it doesn't have to be 5 times, but answer it as many times as you can until you get to really pulling apart what motivates you. And if you're not reflecting on those whys, or if you're not trying to figure out the emotion behind those whys at each point, then I find that it gets less and less powerful. So it's really, it's a raw topic and a raw conversation to have with yourself, and it can get pretty real.
Yeah,
it's really powerful.
It almost sounds like it can be guided by a coach or whoever, but it's really something that you need to do on your own, because you might 100%. Get into some really, really deep stuff there that 100%. You don't want to. It's not like in your first coaching consultation you want to be like, so why do you want to do this and why do you want to do that, and like mining down. I mean, if I was to look at any goal I had and apply why 5 times, apply why, I like that. I would probably by the 5th one be like sobbing in the corner or something like that,
right?
You totally don't want to do that, in front of, like, especially if your new coach is you're just meeting them on Zoom or on any kind of like platform, and then they just disappear from the frame. It would be super awkward. So
100%.
And I think
that's the exact same rebuttal or response that I've had from every personal trainer or coach that I've explained this process to. They're like, oh man, that's like pretty hard to have. And it really is. And which is, I kind of, I set it up as a video and walk them through the whole experience as a video and give them a task sheet and something like that to do. Then I'm like, do this in your own time when you feel safe in a space. And for whatever level you decide to share with me, if any at all, then we can move forward from there. But I don't expect someone on their first chat with me to kind of delve into their deepest and darkest secrets.
Yep. And once you have once you have the values, but also once you've gotten to the bottom of their goals, do you then use those goals? Like, how often do you remind them of, this was your goal and this was your reason behind it, and how that related to your values? Because I know, like, a lot of people that really struggle with motivation, like even these strategies are going to be things that they struggle to continue that intrinsic motivation, because I mean, even writing this down, it's still external to you. You have to really like internalize it before it becomes something that you're actually using to drive you and guide you. So, do you find that when you start working with someone, I mean, if you have some of this information that you initially have to, choose to remind them quite often, and then as they start going through these behavioral changes, that they almost start to remind themselves, and then in the end they're not so it doesn't require so much from you as a coach, and really you just go back to the coaching stuff,
100%.
how many calories to eat, how to change your macros, those really base things that most people that is the top level of their coaching, where really you've gone way beyond that, worked on some behavioral change, and then now your reward for that is that you can continue working with them, and they have this amazing behavioral change that they can then continue using moving forward through their life.
100%. Yeah, essentially you nailed it. So the research shows that there's anywhere between, I believe it was 22 and 112 days for habit formation stuff to happen. On mean, it was like 55 days. So it was like, and you just described the whole experience, right? It's like, all right, if I can get people to walk through this and do be working on behavioral changes so they get to a point that they can sustain it themselves, like there's obviously going to be a large initial investment and stuff. So I'm reminding of them quite frequently, especially in the first 4 weeks, just to help keep it at the top of their mind. But I also like to, in every conversation and stuff that I have with them as well. So if I hear them talking about something that really doesn't align with their goals and stuff like that, I remember, like, I say, like, I completely hear, and that's a very awesome, like, comment or idea or something like that. However, remember, we spoke about this as the initial goal and stuff like that. So maybe you've changed your goals and stuff like that. And I always check back in to ask that, because sometimes people do develop their goals and they're like, it's actually a bit more than this or a bit less than this. And so it makes it kind of a moving target.
Yeah.
But after about 4 weeks, I tend to drop off how frequently I have to do it, because they self-select in the conversation. They talk about it all the time. And actually, like, heaps of clients go through like the winning phase, which is where they're like, I did the exact same thing with your approach when I was doing it 4 weeks ago. I failed, and now I'm doing it here, and we're succeeding and stuff like that, and achieving the things that they wanted to be achieving, which feels really, really freaking validating. It feels really good.
Yeah, I bet. Do you find as well that some people will start with a goal and then they start digging down into their whys, and then it ends up being that there's another goal that they either change to or that you can help them arrive at that would be more suitable for addressing the actual really deep why?
Right.
You know, maybe
Yeah.
somebody's goal is to lose 5 kilos or whatever because they want to look better on the beach, but actually there's other stuff going on that's more important and can be more effective to whatever that really
Yeah, man.
that deeper goal is.
Yeah, that's the beauty of getting them to walk through this process for themselves, is because what that we like in the social contract says to say, like, when we talk about ourselves and stuff like that, say as little as we can. Like, don't talk about ourselves. When people are asking about themselves, asking about you, they really want to hear about themselves, and they want to get onto their favorite topic, which is themselves. So people will say, like, whatever they need to say as a goal to kind of like tick off the box. Yep, I told him my goal. And so in doing that, that's also one of the reasons why I didn't like how goals were kind of communicated, at least to me, because it felt like it was like just never enough. It was like, I get what you're saying and I hear it, but like, I must be kind of a little bit special because I can't talk like that. I just would be like, well, it doesn't apply to you. You're not doing this and stuff like that. So people think I'm being blunt, but I just don't understand that contract where it's like, if I'm not meant to talk about myself, then why ask? So that like always confused me, that there was like this standard that people would do to not talk about themselves, to like kind of deflect and move on away from that and just start working on applicable things to drive towards that goal, when really they have something that actually exists way deeper. And if they get to that and they uncover that for themselves, the process obviously becomes way easier, because it's what the exact stuff that they actually align with. And there might be they might be doing like a diet might be the complete opposite of what they actually need. They might just need to experience what it's like to eat a full amount of food instead of always restricting themselves, and like feel what a full amount of energy and stuff feels like in their body, to be able to like train properly and see the composition changes that can come about with that, or just the vitality and feeling, you know, healthy again, where, you know, from instead of another restrictive diet. So I think that's one of like the greatest aspects of this, is that we can really outline if it's a right goal or not for them through their own journey of pulling apart those questions. And then with that, we can, you know, align it, those motivations again, to become self-identified. It's like way easier for them to achieve. And then this is where I say people hit the Goldilocks zone. Is like, it doesn't take anything. They do like just keep coming back, and it's like getting fat loss, sleeping easy, food's great, training well. I'm like, cool, we don't need to change anything. We're in this zone again. Like, we'll sit here until it stops. And like that happens quite frequently, especially in those contexts and conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I find, well, to be fair, the Goldilocks zone is kind of a hard zone to retain a client. I find, like, if you get someone where it's feeling easy for them, you know, they're not having to try very hard, they're getting results. A lot of clients will then go, oh, sweet, I don't need coaching anymore.
Right.
But I mean, that is kind of the goal for me. Like, I never want to have a client that I have to continually work with forever. Like, you know, some people have goals, you know, that are 18 months ahead, and they choose to work together for those longer periods of time. But in most cases, I want to try and work with a client, help them to the point where they can then help themselves, and then, you know, set them free and on their merry
100%.
way. And, you know, with all of my clients, I always leave the door open if they ever want to even just chat. They don't have to come back and start paying me again. They can just come back and
Right.
say, hey, remember when we spoke about this? Can you remind me? Whatever the case is. Um, but I noticed that a lot of the stuff you're talking about here with regards to goals and I mean, obviously it then goes down to values and all that. It's very, very different to what you get taught when you do your personal training qualification or
Yeah.
when you do, you know, I've done a number of courses either as a nutritionist or an S&C coach
Mhm.
or whatever, and all of them talk about goal setting. And
Yeah.
everyone's still using the SMART model, and I'm sure everyone watching this has heard of the SMART model before. And
Mhm.
I mean, as far as I can tell, it's kind of, I mean, it's just brushing the surface, you know. Yeah,
100%.
you can make a goal more of a goal, but it never really gets deeper
Yeah.
and to the actual reasons behind it. And I think, do you think this is something that needs to be implemented into those sort of qualifications, or do you think this is like another step and you know that initial basic level of those smart goals is fine for someone just doing their, you know, wherever you are, your personal training qualification in your
Yeah.
country, and that this should be like an additional thing on top of that, much like a lot of other certifications are.
Yeah, it's funny that you ask. I think that the whole actual standard for the Cert 3-4 that is here in Australia, or at least whatever the equivalent is elsewhere, should be raised. I think that if you're going to be like, if clients are coming to you with the expectation that you're a therapist, their lawyer, their nutritionist, their personal trainer,
Mm-hmm.
their administrator, all at the same time when they come in to do a gym session and stuff with you, I think that there should be a way higher minimum like standard for the level of education qualifications and stuff that you get out of this. And you're totally right. That SMART acronym, the sustainable, measurable, actionable, result based, and time
Time,
based.
yeah.
Yeah, realistic and time based. Sorry, that acronym is kind of right, and I do like it after the whole process of what I just spoke about,
Mm-hmm.
because then when you apply that context, when you use those ways to define what that actual goal is, you can create something that's really meaningful. But
Yep.
when it's just that smart base one without any context behind it, it's kind of like, I want to lose 3 kilos in 12 weeks. Like, cool, you ticked off those things, but it was like the why behind it actually helps drive this whole process. So it's not just the fact that you've said it and told me and stuff. But I like to use it, and then I think there's a couple of extra steps that you can go through to help make it even more powerful. And you can do some comparing and contrasting. So after you've spoken through their why and then develop that SMART goal context, you can also then start looking at obstacles that they've got in their road or like had hit them before, so they can self-identify. Like, look, I really like learning through video, and the last
Mm-hmm.
person that I worked with just sent me heaps of text, so that didn't help. So it's like, all right, cool, there's an easy win for us to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, give you video content to digest. Like, or it could be that every time I eat out with my friends, I feel the pressure to finish all the food that's left on my plate. It was like, oh, clearly we've got issues that we just need to talk about through previous nutritional imprinting, where your parents or social society tells us that we have to finish whatever food and stuff's left on our plate,
Mm-hmm.
and we can talk through that and why that logic is like fallen apart and doesn't need to exist, but it did so from like post World War II, and it kind of developed and continued from there. And so we can like, they can identify what obstacles and stuff, and so that's a great like strategy to get them to even just start giving us things that we can start working on and stuff as well. And then I like to do this comparing and contrasting it, and I get people to imagine exactly, if we did work together for 12 weeks and nothing went right, nothing worked out, and it was a complete failure, what would that look like? And it seems like a weird question to ask, but I'm like, all right, like, for most people, it's like nothing changes, or at worst, I go backwards.
Yep.
But it's like, all right, cool. Now, like, describe that situation, put yourself in that reality, like, not just talk about it, but like, if you like shut your eyes and imagine getting heavier, or imagine putting on more body fat, or imagine getting lower energy, or not seeing your kids and stuff like that. Like, really imagine this scenario and stuff to happen, because we can just say like, oh, yeah, not going backwards, that's easy. But again, that emotional linkage is not happening. There's no investment in it. So it's like, create the sights, the sounds, the whole experience, because then it's a rich actual existence. It's actually some real possibility that if everything didn't go right and we fucked up, and what I took from you was 12 weeks of time and all your money and nothing happened, like, there is this reality, it's a potential to be here. And for some people, seeing what failure looks like is a really big way for them to go like, wow, okay, like I could do that. And like, this is where I'm headed towards. And if I look at the past 12 weeks, all I've done is this exact same thing. 12 weeks ago, I did this and like, I didn't go anywhere and I just got a little bit heavier and I didn't invest in my life, or I didn't start training. I didn't do anything. And so like, I'm going down this path now. And for some, that's a really powerful strategy. And then I contrast that, and I want them to walk through what success looks like. If in 12 weeks time, we nailed absolutely everything and you left, what would that look like? Walk through that experience as well now, because we know how real failure looks now. We've created this experience. We've shut our eyes. We've felt it. We tasted it. We smelt it. So do the same thing with success. Walk yourself through exactly what that looks like. Where are you? What are you doing? Are you having fun? What does the world look like when you've had these massive changes and stuff? So create that reality as well. And through doing that experience, walking people through that one, that's a powerful one, because we can identify whether they respond better to seeing and being reminded of stuff of failures, because it could be that experience, those topics and stuff that they spoke about, has way more of an impact on them than success. And some people respond better to success. So knowing which way and something is like a better way of communicating and reminding people of their goals and what they wanted to achieve is really important. But not only that, I then get a way better sense of what they actually mean by their goals and stuff like that. They might say their smart context is like all these things and stuff like that, but for what I imagine that means could be completely different. So hearing if they're willing to share what that looks like and stuff like that, like what that can give me way more insight into this other stuff that I could be doing. So not only have they given me obstacles and things that I can action on and stuff like that, but now they've either painted that success or failure. So I'm like, oh shit, they really didn't want to like go back in energy and stuff like that, or they know they want to nail their sleep and stuff like that. So this is how I can remind them. This is the stuff I can remind them of, or they're imagining a life really with a lot of energy so that they can run around with their kids and stuff. So clearly they've got that enough of a reason and stuff there. It's just they just need to be reminded and rewarded. Reminded of that reality of that experience, because when we say something about, I just like in 12 weeks time, I just get a bit fatter, no emotional investment in that. It's again, just like saying they're superficial goals without really talking it out. It's putting it off without actually experiencing it. And that's the mind doing its brilliant job, is like stopping us from feeling something that it doesn't want to experience, and putting us off that stuff. So we kind of have to let ourselves experience those things to then be reminded of where it is and stuff that we want to be working on and what we're afraid of seeing come to life.
Do you find that when you dive into that stuff, that there's a difference in the way you can help someone or motivate someone who is moving towards something as opposed to away from something?
Yeah, 100%. And I think what like as well as that, I get a lot of people that say like, "Oh, it's starting to sound a lot like counseling and therapy and stuff like that." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a fair point." Because if someone brought up something that they're like, "I'm scared of getting like abused or something like that," or like they brought up real trauma, then that would be out of my scope to start talking on and saying like, "Oh, don't worry, my nutritional program will fix this." Like that's kind of a bit fucked up. But if we're not asking the questions, if we're not having that conversation, how do we even know that any of these things that could be there? So we like potentially not asking is just as harmful as asking and then acting on some information that's out of your scope. So I like to like remind people of it. It's like we're just having the conversation to get this information out. If we do identify something like that, that's the best time that we can go like, look, this is too hot and heavy for me to even touch. Let's address this, come back at it. We'll just press pause on the stuff. You've already paid this bit, whatever. I won't charge you. Everything will just get paused and we'll come back. Once I got a letter to say that, you're good to go to make this happen. Otherwise, I don't want to like, put your own mental health at risk. And I think that's way more respect worthy than, oh yeah, thanks for telling me, let's action this through my, 3 times a week glue program so that your boyfriend will love you again. Yeah, cool. That's like way stepping out of my scope. So I just wanted to add that in there as something that I was just thinking about as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to realize that, I mean, if you're looking at it from a coach's perspective, or even if you're thinking about talking about it with your coach, that, if you would talk to a friend about it or something like that, then it's probably fine and probably within scope. But as soon as you get onto things that, a friend wouldn't be able to deal with, then you're probably also in an area that as a coach, you shouldn't be dealing with, unless you also
100%.
have additional qualifications.
100%. Yeah. And whilst I I've been investing in university qualifications to upskill my psych stuff, and I pay external qualifications and stuff to go through and become qualified there. I still do not even think that like I have any like handling on stuff like that. I would never even imagine to take on the responsibility of that. You know, so like if I don't know why someone would do it with less qualifications or less insurance and less registrations and stuff
Yeah.
like that, who would do it to themselves, because it's just a bad position to end up in. And that way of identifying it, would I tell this to a friend or not, is a really good way to kind of check that, like self-check that guilt of like, have I overstepped the mark here? Am I feeling kind of a conflict of what's going on here? Because that's a really easy one. If you don't, well, unless you've got a kind of screwed moral compass, it should be pretty quickly and easy to assess.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, that whole would you tell it to a friend thing is what I personally use, and I mean, it's definitely a good way to look at it. As far as people working outside of their scope, I think it's, I mean, in Germany, for example, it's pretty bad. As far as I'm aware, you don't need even like a personal training or nutrition qualification to give that advice over here. Um, at least in Berlin anyway. Like there's a lot of people giving advice that they're not qualified to give, and there's really no policing of it. But I think the transition of a lot of people when they get into personal training or nutrition coaching, that there's always this like allure of, oh, I'm a life coach, and that whole life coach thing is, I think, where a lot of people get into that really muddy water of what is with and without, within and without of their scope.
Yeah.
Purely because, you know, if you think of someone as a life coach, it's not so much the things you're qualified to do anymore. It's not, you know, nutrition or training information. It's going into these things that are somebody else's realm. And I'm a big believer of ensuring that you stay within your own lane,
Yeah.
and never be afraid to outsource where you need to, and never be afraid, like maybe you're dealing with someone who's got you know, something's within your scope, but it's not an area you're particularly, you know, knowledgeable in. Never be afraid to outsource to somebody else who's, you know, not even in a different lane to you, just has a different expertise to you. Because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what's important is the client, and you know, that they're getting healthier essentially. You know, it's not about so much about their, you know, fat loss or whatever. It's that overall their general health, you know, all the 6 pillars of health, that they're all improving, or some of them are improving, and we're not going
Yeah.
backwards. You never want a client to leave you in a worse state than when they came to you.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah, that's great. I mirror pretty much all of that. So yeah.
So I've written a few things in the YouTube comments, and people can go there if they need to. I've just put down like the 4 almost steps. So when, you know, when you're doing your qualification, wherever it is, usually goals is the first step. But here I've written down the why, then the goals, then the obstacles, and then describing the success and failure. Is there anything you would add to that, or would you change the order?
Yeah. There's no, that order is great, and there is one thing contextually which really, some people like it, some people hate it, it's very controversial. So I don't know if you remember. Do you remember when Ashley Vines did that? I think her keto challenge, and she was getting people to put money on their like their journey and stuff like that.
I believe who's the lady from Biggest Loser, the American one, Jillian Michaels. She's doing something similar at the moment as well.
Right. So like heaps of people reacted really like negatively and stuff like that. I was super intrigued. I was like, why would you do that? Like there must be so much risk and stuff like that going on, and it seems a little bit weird. And then so I just so happened to stumble one day on contracting, or this concept of contracting around some of the goals and stuff like that people were setting out. And it was, some companies were doing this idea that some behavior would be rewarded, or you would make an initial assessment of your ability to perform something. So say attend a gym, or you know, lose some kilos, or you know, sit in an ergonomic chair, or stand at the desk and stuff like that. So some health related behavior to get people to ensure that environmental stuff was nudging them towards behavioral change. And one of that was this concept of like contracting, like your initial goal and putting some money on it and a time frame on it to hold yourself accountable to it. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. What the hell? And turns out the research shows that it's really powerful. It's a really powerful way at helping keeping us accountable to some of the behavioral changes and stuff that we're trying to do, because we've got like now there's a financial incentive and an investment in doing that, in trying to achieve these goals and stuff like that. And for a lot of people, it works, and for other people, it's just it's not the right time, or they over assume and stuff like that. So it tends to be something that I'm like, would you be interested in? Actually, sorry, before I ask the would you be interested question, and after I go through all that, I'm like, all right, so now that we've spoken about all these, we know exactly where you want to be going, what you want to be doing. We've clarified on all of this. We've got this amazing picture of exactly what we're going to achieve over the next 12 weeks, maybe longer. How confident are you that you will succeed on this? And if they say like out of 10, how confident are you? And if they like, depending on what their answer is, if it's not an 8 or above, I'm like, all right, we've got to clarify on some things, because that's not confident enough to like sustain yourself throughout this thing. So we can either talk, or if they say 8, 9, and 10, which a lot of the time after a session kind of walking through some pretty powerful stuff like that, or a video and there's some exercises walking through that, they come to me quite motivated to like work on these things. So it's like 10 out of 10. All right. So like, would you be willing to put money on that? Just, $100, $1,000, something that scares you. Would you be willing to put that money down on that? Because it can't be something that you just like wouldn't mind losing or giving up and something like that. It has to have that cost to it. And watching people's faces work through this like question of like, how much would I be willing to put on this? Like, is a really interesting thing, because I'm like, you just said that 8 out of 10, but now you're not even willing to back yourself and put $100 down. Like, doesn't really sound like that 8 out of 10 actually aligns with what you're actually going on about now. So it's kind of another tool that I get them to self-assess, and just watching their behavior and their responses and stuff like that to identify if it even looks like they're on the same path, or if they're just kind of telling me what they think they are. I want to hear. And sometimes, they're like, yeah, all right. Like, all right, I'd put $1,000 down. I have a place where they can do it, an app, and I can't recall it. I'll have to pull it up. But there's like a third-party app where people can self-select a money amount and put in a goal and stuff and pay it, and it either goes to a charity or it comes back to them, or after a particular time frame or something like that, where they can put and back themselves and go through this, and it be an extra layer of some security. However, some of the contraindications of that is that now someone's out even more money than not just your coaching service, this particular amount of money that they like have to go through and do just to be able to get that back. Or, people might overextend themselves because they feel pressured in different settings. So that there might be people that paid that wouldn't necessarily pay, but felt really like hyped or G'd up and stuff like that. So feel taken advantage of. And so it kind of looks like a nightmare to kind of navigate, but I'm like, I'll let you do it if you want to do it, but I don't encourage people to do it. But it is a step that I've added because I found it to be something that was so like the research is so clear on how like motivating and powerful it was to add as like this extra layer, that I just like even just asking the question, exploring the question, and saying like, how much would you be willing to pay, like put money down that you to achieve this, and watching people's responses there.
So it's almost like qualifying their motivation. Now that you've got to, the end of this process, you've come up with the real whys, you've gotten to the bottom of their goals, you've identified the obstacles, you've really seen and felt and, heard and tasted what it's going to feel like at the end, whether you succeed or don't. And then it's like, right, so now how motivated are you? It's like really qualifying that. And, it doesn't have to be money. It could be any other way that you can qualify someone's motivation. But if someone's not willing to risk something on it, then, there's a fair chance that, we still have some more digging to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really depends on like how much a coaches charge and stuff like that as well, because I tend to find that if you don't charge enough, people don't bat an eyelid at missing a week and stuff like that. They're like, oh, whatever, it's only $20, $25 or something like that as well. So not only have you done heaps of time and effort and energy, sometimes the fear of how much money that they lose by not actioning and working on these things also has to be taken into account. So like, maybe don't charge try your best at charging $500 a week, but like just making people like bat an eyelid, or at least the population stuff that you want to be working with. So I tend to find that if people are like okay at missing payments and stuff like that, or not achieving things like that, not only does it make me feel like a crappy coach,
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not even charging enough because they don't even care that they're spending this money and it's like not going anywhere, or like, well, they're not getting anything out of it, that I'm just getting paid for free and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a consideration to make into it. But I liked it. I like that, like contracting as like a way to qualify it and just to get a real insight into what all the stuff that we just spoke about. Sometimes some people are still trying to just say stuff to make me happy, or think that, saying the right things to oblige by the social contract. So like, how can I qualify that in some way? And then we just talk about it if it's not, and it gives us more armor and more ammo to face the things that we need to be facing. We're working on developing a plan that's even more clear, or with more concise instructions, or like a different time frame, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Awesome, man. I feel like we've kind of boiled that down to 5 steps. I mean, they're not easy steps by any means, but I've kind of tried to simplify everything you've said into a couple of steps that people watching this can take away and use for themselves or use with their clients. Do you have anything that you'd like to add as far as motivation and all the stuff we've talked about so far?
So putting these things into practice, and using some, like, I built this whole process on a way to leverage the things that we kind of come up against that undo our the momentum that we generate when we kind of have these small wins and stuff going on. So the idea of building this up and having this was to kind of get some small wins happening with a lot of mental exercises and psychological things to keep your power, essentially build up some mental fortitude. And so in doing these, it's a really powerful practice to do, because it helps set you up and to sustain you far beyond what your first initial excitement motivation that most people come to coaches and stuff when they sign up, that they have. That's like all the things that is really going for is something new and exciting. It's like, yes, maybe this guy will be able to help me. Mm-hmm. Something like that process sustains most of the people into like the 4 to 6 week mark, where they start seeing these behavioral changes turning into actual subconscious habits that they've like performed and tweaked, and now are sustaining them in their environments and stuff like that help them achieve the goals without really having to consciously think across everything. So it's a way more powerful process and a way easier process to get a lot of wins early on, to keep you going and help get over those hurdles that normally pull people or throw people off the tracks and make it harder to get back on.
Yeah, great. I think it's especially coming into the new year, and when a lot of people are having these new goals and stuff, it's important for, if you're doing it on your own, to really try and go through these steps early on in the piece, so that once you hit the end of that, 4 to 6 week mark where a lot of people fall off, that you've then kind of dug a bit deeper and you've got your own intrinsic motivation, or at least some going on. And likewise, if you're a coach and you're taking on a bunch of people in the new year, just know that that first 4 to 6 weeks, that's the really hard graft, that you're going to have to do to earn, their business throughout the year, and their success, and them hitting their goals and really nailing all this stuff. So awesome, man. Exactly. I think this was a great first live. I'm very happy that we did this live on YouTube. No one's currently watching, but this will stay up there. Yeah, this will stay up there. And man, I've not only have I learned a bit, but I'm really happy that information is now out there for more people to see. I mean, more people. That's awesome. I don't have that.
Hopefully, it's stimulated some brain juices for some people to get them thinking about how they go about their own process and what they do to make that better. So hopefully it helps.
I mean, it definitely has. Before we wrap up, I mean, at the start, we didn't really introduce you. So can you give everyone an idea of who you are, what you do, and how they can find more information about you or working with you?
Yeah, cool. I guess you could say like I'm an online nutritionist now. I still feels really weird saying that I'm online. It's kind of like what I've always done. But I study at UQ at my university for a Bachelor of Exercise and Nutritional Science with the original intentions of becoming a dietitian. Now I'm kind of changing that. So I'm just doing my undergrad and I'll swap over it. And so I'll just be currently a sports nutritionist. Will be a registered nutritionist here in Australia, which is kind of a protected term. It's a very convoluted area. Who works on people who just want to sustain behavioral change into the long term, who really have just the issues with that the maintenance stuff that goes on. We can lose weight pretty well. Most people just restrict enough things. Eventually they can lose some weight, but it's that like turning that into that long-term maintenance. How do I hold this and keep this going for the rest of my life? That's kind of everything that I've built up and set up and stuff. So you can find me on Instagram, just at my first name, Dalton Franke. So first name, last name, Dalton Franke _ coaching. That's my coaching page. My Facebook page is just Dalton Franke as well. And my website is daltonfranke.com, which is weird. Like so many Dalton Frankes. It's a funny world doing that. So yeah, you'll find me all around that. Plus, if you just type Dalton Franke into Google, there's a whole bunch of podcast articles and things that I've done all over the internet. So I'm everywhere.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, dude. If you made it this far in the video, I want to say a massive thank you, and I hope you learned something. If you have any questions for either myself or Dalton, you can leave them in the comments below. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like me, maybe consider subscribing. Until next time, I've been Nick. This has been Nicktrition. See you in the next video.